Hello out there in the health world. This is Dr. John Brimhall, and tonight with me is Dr. Mark Harris. We're always excited to get to hear him speak and to bring us up to date on the latest research that he's doing and the seminars he has going on around the country. So let me highlight for you what's coming up here in the very near future. Dr. Harris has formulated new products for OHS, and they're all whole food, pre-digested food products, and there's just nothing like him in the country anywhere. Dr. Harris, if you don't know who he is, you're in for a great surprise, but he actually graduated from high school at 7, college at 9, and before his 12th birthday. He has 3 PhDs that he counts, and an MD, naturopathic degree, and a medical degree. He has the audacity to have a photographic memory. He reads the literature in 3 languages, and then he boils it down and spells it out to us above and beyond what any of us can even imagine. I don't know what it would be like to have his memory. I can only even dream of it, but to me, he's like Tesla and Benjamin Franklin and Einstein all rolled into one. I know he doesn't like me bragging him on like that. He tried to hide this, but we pulled him out of the closet here 3 years ago. Not the same thing you think about pulling out of the closet, but hiding from the world just in Bozeman, Montana, treating thousands of patients. It takes about 4 months to get into him to become vocal again and giving us the insights of what's going on out there. So we're highlighting a little bit today what's going to go out of Homecoming. Homecoming this year is earlier than normal. It's actually the New Year's week. We're going to do the treating on the Thursday, the 3rd of January. 4th, 5th, and 6th will be the Homecoming seminar. Much of the main category will be videotaped and be available after the seminar, but there's nothing like seeing it in full face value there. Dr. Harris has 3 classes. He's going to talk a little bit about those classes, but he's going to talk about Parkinson's and infection and all kinds of things there. He'll highlight that for us in a minute, but particularly he's going to talk about the methylation, the genetic SNPs that we have, and how to change them epigenetically through the nutrition and the 6 steps to wellness that we talk about. So you don't want to miss that. So if you haven't got a hold of Jason, just go to brimhall.com and we'll give you all the details. If you're not on the puzzle piece every week, we don't ever take anybody off, but sometimes the computer cuts you off and you're not getting those. So you can just go to brimhall.com and find Jason's number, or you can write this down, 480-964-5198. 480-964-5198, or Jason at brimhall.com will also get you there. We have so many speakers. As Dr. Brett and I are going to teach all 6 steps. We're going to have workshops. We're going to assist Dr. Harris in his workshop. We'll cover everything from adrenals to the new products we have coming out. We have Opti Lung, Opti GI, and what's the third one, Dr. Harris?
Opti Heart.
Opti Heart. How could I forget that? We've been begging for that now for a while. So that's good. This photographic memory helped me out there with my genetic SNP there in my brain. So I'm not old and I don't have memory problems. They're just real short sometimes. So he's helping me out. We have Opti Brain to do that, Opti Adrenal, Opti Thyroid, Opti Iodine. So we're adding these other 3 right now. So Dr. Brett and I are going to cover all aspects of the 6 steps to wellness and the different classes and workshops that we have. Dr. Harris, as I mentioned, is going to go over his workshop on the methylation process, on the genetic SNPs and epigenetic expression. We're going to have Dr. Porter is going to be there covering the brain, its function, and how to get you where you can, with his brain tap method, do more than a week's worth of meditation. You can do it in about 20 minutes. And this year we have another part on the psychological aspect. We have Vaughn Cook, who has the CEO and founder of Zyto, so he can help you look at emotions, toxicities, chemical problems, nutritional deficiencies, and then the eVox, which we did a webinar on just 2 weeks ago, where the eVox, by you speaking into the microphone, it can tell which parts of your emotional triangle is out of sync, and then they can put specific answers to that back into your system and help you to change your perceptions literally in a few minutes that you've been stuck on for life. We have one of the laser researchers and patent holders in the whole world. Curtis Turchin is going to be there this time. We have not been able to have him before. He's going to show you entire therapy you can do with light. and to adjust the spine, to release emotions, to literally work on all 6 steps using LDD and laser. We have Dr. Smaldone coming this year. He hasn't been with us for 4 years. It was standing room only when he was there last time. He is not only a trainer, but he's an athletic performer. He's a weightlifter, bodybuilder. He's formulating nutrition of his own that we're performing all the tests and batches now that he's going to have available. But he is the master adjuster and taper. So that is a phenomenal. Watch him treat plantar fasciitis, shoulder problems, knee problems. And of course, Dr. Harper is going to be there too. And he's going to show you his 5-minute chiropractic exam, which is really a chiropractic, orthopedic, neurological exam, literally. And he can tell you, does the person need ozone? Does the person need opti-nutrients to solve the problem? Do they need biological allografts to stimulate your own stem cells in your body? Do you need opti-stem cell to help the body's own ability to produce more stem cells? It's a phenomenal approach. And he, as well as Dr. Moore, is going to be there. She is an ND who's just amazing in all the field of injection therapy. And although we're not going to be teaching injections there, Dr. Harris and I get to go around the country and teach biological allograft, ozone, the cutaneous nervous system, and how to make changes in literally 5 to 10 minutes. I've seen people with lifetime migraines get better, sciatica pain better, chronic back pain. It's just, he's a miracle worker with that. And so there's some work out there called perineural. I know Dr. Harris has taken that, and he's honed in on his ability to look at different languages and different books to hone that into the cutaneous nervous system. So if you're not confused already, you can realize you've got to get there and see this 3-day action-packed situation. There's other speakers that are going to be assisting us as well as Dr. Harper being out in the hall. Even though he only has an hour from the platform, he and Shirley will be out in the hall, and also Jolene from the Biological Allograft Company, and telling you how he integrates offices, how he has even how he has a whole financial package that he uses with his doctors in teaching you exit strategies. So there's just so much this is going to happen that January 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. Again, 3rd is just an evening where we treat. And if you want to get treated, you need to call and schedule that with Jason. I think Dr. Harris still has an appointment or 2 open. And some of the other doctors that always help us out there too are going to be there assisting you. Well, I don't want to go on all night. Hopefully Dr. Harris can tell us about his methylation seminars he's doing, 1 or 2 a month. We're going to be doing 4 major stem cell seminars. We don't inject cells. We teach you how to use biological allografts to have your own stem cells replenish, rebuild, and repair. Because a juvenile stem cell, according to research, reproduces 1 billion times. When you're my age, 71, it's lucky to reproduce 100 to 200 times. So as you might imagine, I'm having Dr. Harris give me some stem cell injections or biological allografts and take opti-stem cell myself. I never have formulated nutrition or recommended a treatment I have not had. And it's a pleasure to get to travel a little bit with Dr. Harris and to watch his mind work. If you haven't seen it, you've got to see it. If you've been there before, you want to be there again. Dr. Harris, we're turning it over to you.
My genuine thanks, John, and that introduction is much more than I'm worth. Well, let me just tell you, last week I was doing a methylation seminar down in Los Angeles, and I read an article about 3 months ago that got me thinking. So I've been diving into the literature, and I think I got something all figured out, and I figured it out, and I finished up that Sunday morning before lecturing, and I've already worked this into the slides for homecoming. And at homecoming, I'm going to present what I think is the true cause of Parkinson's disease. And that'll be the first time I've ever presented this. So that'll be at homecoming also. But tonight, I'm going to the first slide you're looking at now looks at Alzheimer's disease. And they call this the #1 most feared disease, right ahead of cancer. And anyone who thinks about getting this disease could understand why they're calling it that. So we're going to go through a bit of that, and we're going to kind of bring in a few different ideas that have come out of the pike and try to get a partial picture of it right now. And then during homecoming, we're going to kind of piece it all together and get you some great ideas on how to deal with it, because this is going to become one of the worst things that's ever happened to health, and it's going to get even worse. So basically, the first one we can talk about is how much Alzheimer's costs. So in 2018 dollars, they estimate 186 billion to Medicare and 5.5 million people having the disease. And this is hospital-based care. This does not include home care or other things that have to be done. And they estimate by 2050, there'll be 13.8 billion people with the disease, costing it then $750 billion. But I think this is a conservative estimate because as the baby boomers get older, this disease is going to be burgeoning, and it's likely this thing will bankrupt the Medicare system. So now when we talk about other costs involved, there are many things. So there are follow-up visits, there's medical stuff you got to put in your house, there's safety things, because people with Alzheimer's they just get into trouble because they don't remember where their house is, they don't remember what sharp things are, and then drugs they have to take home, supplies, and it's estimated right now this might surpass the cost of hospital care, because in 2018 dollars, the amount that's been spent on home care in addition to hospital care is $110 billion. Now, if this increases at the rate of hospital care, and it's likely to increase much faster because the cost of home care and hospice care and all that is far outpacing the cost of what's happening in hospitals. So this one is probably going to be in a $1 to $2 trillion range that will cost every year to treat Alzheimer's, and that's about the entire budget of the US government. Okay, well, let's go a little bit now, not to be frightened you with cost, let's go a little bit now into what are purported to be the causes of Alzheimer's disease. So there have been a few things that have been brought up. So, and this is a lot, but we'll go over this in a little bit of detail. So molecular biochemical abnormalities. Well, of course something's going wrong, because if there wasn't any abnormalities, we wouldn't have the disease. And then they say, well, it could be cell loss. Well, what causes cell loss to happen? Is it just age? If it were, everybody of the same age would have the same condition. So we got to whatever age it was, we'd all have Alzheimer's, but you don't see that. And then we get to neurofibrillatory tangles. Now, this is one of the primary ideas of Alzheimer's, but again, we have to ask the question, why do they form? And then this thing called a dystrophic neurite. We'll get into that a little bit because it's a little bit of a nebulous term. And then APP, amyloid precursor protein. Now, this is a beneficial thing until other problems happen. And then what we've all heard of is beta amyloid deposits, and then the charming thing of pro-death genes. Well, what the heck are those? Do we have genes that are causing death in our system? And then the other things look like metabolic syndrome, that's a blood sugar problem. And they're starting to call diabetes, pardon me, Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. Well, is that justified or not? And then impaired energy metabolism. Well, that's sort of the same as the next one, mitochondrial dysfunction. That's where we make energy. So of course, that's going to be a problem because mitochondria over time, really starting at age 20, they drop by 10% per decade. And they drop enough and we die, but they don't drop quite enough and it can cause problems, including energy metabolism in the brain. And we use more mitochondria in our brain than anywhere else. And then they talk about chronic oxidative stress and what causes oxidative stress. And there's another thing called nitrogen stress, which that might even be worse. And then damage to DNA. Well, let's explore this in a little bit of detail and see what we can figure out. Okay, then we want to look at this interesting map. The stuff in red are the places that get Alzheimer's the most. And we see these are the most developed countries. And then the stuff in slightly lighter color are the developing countries that are getting more money and more things like we do. So what would it be about modern life that causes Alzheimer's disease? Let's look into that a little bit. Okay, so there's a couple of references here, but let's look at this pile of stuff. Now that doesn't look too bad. It's got a little bit of a reddish tinge to it. So this is something that when you eat a cow that comes from a feedlot, you eat the meat of the cow. But what happens to the bones and the livers and the pancreases and the brains and all that stuff? Well, that is put into a plant called a rendering plant. Rendering, they use all the non-edible parts of the cow. They send it through this gargantuan blender, and then they dry it, and it looks like that. And then they feed it back to cows. So in fact, cows are cannibals because we caused them to be. But what is that? That was showing to be a problem with mad cow disease because there were brains in the rendering stuff. So when cows ate cow brains, they got mad cow disease. So now it's been banned that cows can't have cow brains fed back to them. So now they feed the cow brains to chickens, but they feed the chicken brains to cows. So this has been a bit of a problem because in Papua New Guinea, there was a practice of eating their ancestors' brains because it was thought it would give them wisdom. But instead, it gave them a disease called Jacob disease, and they also called Kuru, and it was the same thing. Creutzfeldt-Jakob or Kuru is a degeneration of their brains. So we're not designed to eat the brains of ourselves, but the thing about a cow brain, if they're eating a chicken brain, are we getting any of that? Well, it's in the cow. So we had the expression, you are what you eat, but maybe it should be you are what you ate, because that's in them too. Okay, so let's talk now about a dystrophic neurite. We talked a little bit a couple slides ago about neurofibrillary tangles. Well, these tangles get caught up in the nerves. That's what makes them problematic. And it's also been shown to be a problem in Huntington's disease and Alzheimer's and early stage and late stage Alzheimer's. But the problem is not the nerve, it's the tangle. So why are we forming the tangles? Okay, so this happens when nerve cells lose their form, and that's when the tangles occur. But let's look at the tangles a little bit more. Okay, so neurofibrillary tangles, think of the nerve without its sheath, and the sheath keeps them separate. And if the sheath goes away, then we get these tangles and also what are called amyloid plaques. But let's go a little deeper. Now, this is a video that came out in 1997, but it didn't talk much about one thing that's important. It just kind of glossed over it, but let's have a look at this one.
To better understand mercury's effect on the brain, let us first illustrate what brain neurons look like and how they grow. In this animation, we see 3 brain neurons growing in a tissue culture, each with a central cell body and numerous neurite processes. At the end of each neurite is a growth cone where structural proteins are assembled to form the cell membrane. 2 principal proteins involved in growth cone function are actin, which is responsible for the pulsating motion seen here, and tubulin, a major structural component of the neurite membrane. During normal cell growth, tubulin molecules link together end to end to form microtubules, which surround neurofibrils, another structural protein component of the neuronal axon. Shown here is the neurite of a live neuron isolated from snail brain tissue, displaying linear growth due to growth cone activity. It is important to note that growth cones in all animal species, ranging from snails to humans, have identical structural and behavioral characteristics and use proteins of virtually identical composition. In this experiment, neurons also isolated from snail brain tissue were grown in culture for several days, after which very low concentrations of mercury were added to the culture medium for 20 minutes. Over the next 30 minutes, the neurite membrane underwent rapid degeneration, leaving behind the denuded neurofibrils seen here. In contrast, other heavy metals added at this same concentration, such as aluminum, lead, cadmium, and manganese, did not produce this effect. To understand how mercury causes this degeneration, let us return to our illustration. As mentioned before, tubulin proteins link together during normal cell growth to form the microtubules which support the neurite structure. When mercury ions are introduced into the culture medium, they infiltrate the cell and bind themselves to newly synthesized tubulin molecules. More specifically, the mercury ions attach themselves to the binding site reserved for guanosine triphosphate, or GTP, on the beta subunit of the affected tubulin molecules. Since bound GTP normally provides the energy which allows tubulin molecules to attach to one another, mercury ions bound to these sites prevent tubulin proteins from linking together.
Okay, so that's most of what we need to see. Now, there's a couple of comments on this because they talked about GTP, guanosine triphosphate. It's similar to ATP, but this is preferentially used in other places, like here. Now, they talk about these tubulin molecules that make microtubules, I think very nicely named, tubulin. And this is one of the more interesting facts in biology. These things assemble at approximately 40,000 per second when we're making these microtubules. Then they also mentioned that lead and aluminum did not cause the same problem, but what they said was at the same concentration. But what we found now, this was published in 1997 at the University of Calgary. Since then, we found that lead and aluminum do the same thing, but at higher concentrations, but not much higher. Okay, so if we look at now the microtubule, we see once you take off the microtubule, then the nerves form tangles or neurofibratory tangles. Okay, but now we got a neurofibratory tangle. Let's look a little more at these tubules because they're interesting. Now, when something is made inside a cell, it doesn't necessarily stay inside of a cell. It has to move around inside the cell. And it has to move around a lot because not everything has to stay in a place. And cells we think of as very small, but you get something like a neurotransmitter or something else, or even a mitochondria, they can move around the cell to do things where they need to be. Now, the things that move around the cells, we were just looking inside a microtubule, but we also have action outside of microtubules. So this is another video we're going to look at, and this will explain what happens on the outside of the microtubule to move things apart. Then we're going to form a little bit more of a hypothesis here. And this is the actual sound. No, it really isn't. Now you're inside a cell. And now we start to see microtubules. There's some more. So this is a chemical called kinesin, and this marches things down the outside of the microtubule. It's made up of actin, the same thing that makes our muscles move. And then when it has to move back, it's called dynein, but that's not terribly important right now. So basically, if we look at this kinesin marching down, it has to find a place to stop. And the stops at tau proteins. They are stop signals. So as the microtubule degrades, the taus are removed from the microtubule. So now we have neurofibratory tangles and tau protein aggregates. These are two of the main things that seem to cause Alzheimer's. And then the tau protein, the microtubules, the tau proteins then form inside the neurites, and we get dystropic neurites. So now we're seeing a lot of effects, but now we're seeing a couple of causes because we saw mercury degrading the microtubule, and then we see it also with lead and mercury. But is this the sole cause? Well, let's look. Because there's been a lot of studies that say a problem is sugar. So there was a drug originally called streptozotocin. It was an antibiotic, but they found that it poisoned the pancreas and it couldn't make any insulin. So of course, they gave this to rats and they weren't making any insulin, but the sugar was still higher. They developed Alzheimer's. Then they did another study where they inhibited sugar in the body, but insulin was still there, and that also caused Alzheimer's plaques in the rat brains. So insulin, of course, when we eat sugar, it spikes insulin, and then other things affect insulin as well. So now we have heavy metals, we have insulin and sugar that also seem to be causing Alzheimer's disease. So insulin did it in the absence of sugar, and sugar did it in the absence of insulin. And they gave the poor rats Alzheimer's. Doesn't he look confused? He doesn't know which way to go. All right, now copper. Copper is crucial to health, but not all copper is the same. So we have this thing called LRP, which stands for low density lipoprotein receptor related protein. For some reason, someone thought LRP was a good acronym. And LRP is basically a portal in the brain that helps to remove beta amyloid from our brain. And beta amyloid, as we get to that in just a minute, beta amyloid plaques from the tangles and the taus. And copper interferes with it, but this is primarily inorganic copper. So copper sulfate is a fungicide and an herbicide that's sprayed on crops, both in the US and in primarily other countries because it's inexpensive. And then the other big source of inorganic copper is the water pipes under our homes. If your home was built before about 2002, you've got copper water pipes. If it was built before 1930, you've got lead water pipes. If it was built after 2004, you've got PEX, but they've got copper fittings because you can't bend PEX into a sharp 24-degree angle or it will kink. So they use copper instead. And the inorganic copper causes this problem with the LRP, and then it can't remove the plaques from the brain. So if you have copper pipes and you don't want to replace them all, let the water run for a while before you drink it, because it's not sitting in there before it's turned on and accumulating a lot of copper. And then copper sulfate, well, not much we can do about that. Okay, now the copper zinc ratio has also been shown to be a problem with cancer as well. Okay, now there's also a connection between herpes simplex 1, which we often just think of as cold sores. But some of the thinking on the beta amyloid plaques, and we've got literature on this, is that the beta amyloid is part of the immune system, and the herpes can get into the brain, and it can especially be reactivated as we get older, and then we build up more beta amyloid as part of the immune system to go after the herpes. So now we're starting to look at a few different things. We're looking at heavy metals, we're looking at sugar and insulin, we're looking at infections, and now we start to see a bit of a pattern of the 6 steps to wellness, which Dr. John Brimhall was so magnanimous in putting out there, and we're going to learn about at Homecoming even more. Okay, so now let's look at some pro-death genes. All right, so basically we get a gene, we have a cell, and we get fragmentation, what's called blebbing over here, and chromatin seems to come on, and then we get an apoptotic body. Apoptosis is the process of cell death. But it doesn't just do that for no reason. Often it's from too much calcium getting to the cell, and that can be from something like electromagnetic stress, as Martin Paul at Washington State wrote so eloquently about in 4 studies. Okay, so we kind of consider all these things more or less effects of the things we just talked about, heavy metals and lead, mercury, those kinds of things. And then also we saw oxidative stress doing this and other things. So now amyloid precursor protein. When it's working right, it works kinase enzymes, which help turn on the enzymes, where phosphorylation turns off enzymes. Kind of the same thing that happens to our genes, where methylation turns them off and acetylation turns them on. And then it protects against oxidative stress in the brain. They also help with cholesterol, and if cholesterol gets oxidized, it causes a much bigger problem. And then they're antimicrobial, because we see that microbes can cause problems with inflammation in the body also. So the betaloid, alpha-betaloid at 40 is more common than 42, but that's also more fibrogenic. So either one, not too great. Okay, so the prevailing hypothesis now is amyloid, but it's not conclusive because, again, I think this is an effect. Okay, and that's an amyloid plaque at the AB42, a fibrogenic plaque, and that's, of course, by the neurofibratory tangles. Okay, so we got a couple things we'll put together now. We got the heavy metals we just talked about. We have industrial chemicals and copper-based things, and then antimicrobials, because when a microbe is killed off, it leaves a toxin called a lipopolysaccharide, and these things seem to crawl into our brain and break the blood-brain barrier. So all these comprise to give us a recipe for Alzheimer's. Okay, so we have amyloid precursor protein, about 1% of cases, not that big a thing really. Then we have some genes, the ApoE4, about 20% of the population. That gives you about a 12-fold increased risk of getting cancer, and about a 60% of cases, they're showing that. But ApoE4 by itself doesn't seem to be the problem. It's when it gets additional stresses and injuries to the brain. Okay, and then we have certain inflammatory markers, but why does it get inflamed? Because other things cause inflammation, so these aren't the problems. Okay, so we have other genes. Now we can think of our genes as having good genes and having bad genes. We can pretty much assume that this young lady has good genes. She's fairly attractive, I think. And there's another woman, now a girl we're going to look at, about the same age, perhaps not as good a genes as the first one got. Okay, but then we get what we call SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, and this is something that I'm going to do a 3-hour workshop on Friday at Homecoming. And when genes are working well, they're working very well. When they're working poorly, they're just not working good at all. And then we have really genes gone bad. And they say the road to good intentions is, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Well, when the genes go bad, it's more like the road to hell. Okay, and then we have oxidative stress. Now we have a concept and an aphorism called a canary in a coal mine. Canaries are more susceptible to oxidative stress, so they used to bring them down in coal mines. If the canary keeled over, then they figured they should get out of there. Not the best use of canaries as far as the canary is considered, but oxidative stress we can get in our brain. If we think of our brain, is that our brain is our canary in our bodies. So the brain takes a lot of toxins. Okay, let's talk about something that might cause oxidative stress. We talk about inert ingredients, and what are inert ingredients? Well, you'd think if they're inert, they don't do anything. Why would they be there? Well, they're there to improve activity or application or dilution when it's added to water, so you can charge more for it instead of putting water into yourself. It aids in sticking or spreading stuff on surfaces, and go to a target pest like a pesticide, and for stability during storage. Well, that seems to be all very high up and mighty. And then there's 4 categories. Number 1 is the toxicologic concern. If they don't do anything, why are they toxicological? And they can be minimal concern, but according to who? There's this thing called GRAS, generally recognized as safe, and they're supposed to, the chemical manufacturers are supposed to do studies to earn that, but they do it themselves, and it's not mandatory. So they don't have to do anything and say it's GRAS. It's generally recognized as safe. Let's look at a couple of things that are inert. So in Roundup, which is the chemical glyphosate, and other people make it, but there's POEA, you can see what it stands for, an AMPA, and there's some studies that show it directly causes problems even more than glyphosate by itself does. and we've got some studies here, and they kill cells by poisoning the mitochondria in the plasma membrane. Well, without a membrane, nothing happens, and with mitochondria, you can't make energy. Well, that's not so good, but how much did it take? Well, it did it at 1 part per million. Now, what's a part? Do you count parts per million when you have a glass of water? Well, what a part per million is a metric measure. 1 milligram per liter of water. It's a pretty small amount. Okay, so Monsanto, of course, they have to have their say. So what did they say? Well, this was done, the reference I just showed you was by what's called the Independent Science Panel. And they said, while they can be considered independent, it's not associated with other institutions. So their members are long-term opponents of plant biotech and have long-standing position in opposition. So they couldn't fight the science, so they're going after the scientists instead. Okay, but they went on to say, and this is the one of the two chemicals, the pyrophosphanol pyruvate, important compound in metabolism of all plants and animal species, but no effect has ever been shown in mammalian cells, only in bacteria. Well, if that were the only thing that was true, but we just saw it's not, what about our gut bacteria? What about our skin bacteria? What about our sinus bacteria? It goes after that stuff. And then we get bad bacteria growing. Okay, so now there's also a connection between our emotions and Alzheimer's, and depression and stress has been shown to increase our risk of Alzheimer's disease. And this comes out of the British Journal of Psychiatry, the European Journal of Psychiatry, and Neurology, and there's a lot more studies, but I couldn't put them all in there. Okay, so what these things are saying was the interval between the diagnosis when we get depression is linked to when we get Alzheimer's disease. And then they say depression can be viewed as a modifiable risk factor for Alzheimer's. And then we can maybe go after that with antidepressants. And there's some there. Well, this perhaps doesn't seem like a great idea. Now, Prozac, the chemical name for that is fluoxetine. The flu part is fluoride. And fluoride directly interferes with thyroid hormones, and thyroid hormones are necessary for brain function. So maybe this isn't the way to go. Okay, well, let's look a little bit more into our emotions. Sigmund Freud came up with the id, the ego, and the superego. The id was instinct, and he called this the unconscious mind, the things we know how to do. When we're born, we know how to suckle. That's about all we know how to do as babies. The ego was our reality and our regular thinking, our everyday going. And the superego was our morality, and he called that the subconscious mind. But let's look at that a little bit different. As most of what Freud came up with, it's pretty much been debunked, and we have more ways of coming about it now. So consciousness, we know we're conscious, but we can't really come up with a good idea of consciousness, and we can't even define it. But we know we are, and we think other people are also, but we can't be sure. Now, subconscious, let's say we gave you 4 colors, asked you to open your eyes for a second and tell you what the 4 colors were. You couldn't do it. You could do that. What about 20 colors we see here? If we got rid of those after a second, no way you can tell us what those are. Unconscious, this guy's unconscious, but we don't have to care too much about that. And we have our conscious mind. And how much time do we spend? It's estimated our conscious mind, we spend 5% of our time with conscious thinking, because we go through our days primarily by rote. We know which way to go to work. We know what to do at work. We go through the motions at work. Typically, if I leave home, if I'm in a car, I go to work. Even if I'm not going there, I'm just used to going there. That's subconscious. So the subconscious is feelings and emotions. It's powerful. And when we looked at that last slide, how do we get to here? It's estimated we can handle 4 to 5 bits of information per second. And that's why you could come up with all 4 colors. But we get up to 7 or 8 or 9. We can't handle much more than that. And between our senses, we get about 15 million per second between vision, sight, hearing, touch, and taste. So we have to have a subconscious so we don't get overwhelmed. But it can get too much. Now, we come up with Reichert Hammer. He came up with what he called German New Medicine. And he had 5 steps of this, but the first step was he thought every disease is caused by a conflict that catches an individual off guard, meaning something we weren't prepared for. I don't think that's all of it, but I think it is important. If a cinder block falls on your foot, you weren't prepared for it, but it wasn't a conflict, it was a cinder block. Okay, so the 5 biological laws, a conflict. Okay, so there's something we didn't quite expect. All right, and then came along Roger Callahan. He was an acupuncturist. He came up with something called thought field therapy. And he thought first thing was thought fields and perturbations of thought, meaning a big stress. Then the next step in that was you get an algorithm, and this wasn't a mathematical algorithm. It was certain acupuncture points based on the emotion. And then after that, a causal diagnosis. You came up with a diagnosis based on the algorithm. It got to be a bit of a big deal to do this and a reversal by doing all the points, but every emotion had a different point. So it got really hard to learn. Okay, then along came Gary Craig. He had a set number of points that he shows right there, and you thought about something, you say, even though I have this, whatever problem you have, and you tap at your eye and by the side of your eye. So the first call is called EB, means eyebrow, SE, side of eye, UE, under eye, UN, under nose, CH, chin, CB, and then a point over there. So you tap on these points while you say stuff, and it was of certain value, but not quite enough. Okay, so your subconscious, when you get a lot of stuff going on, your subconscious is pretty much like an iceberg. Only 5% is above the surface, all the rest of it's below it. And early subconscious, kids, what do they have to be stressed? They have basically wants and needs. As you're an infant, you cry, you get what you want. You get a little bit older, you think, well, you keep getting what you want. Then they realize they can't, and they don't understand why. And then later on, as we get older, we get other stresses in life. And basically, different stresses cause different things, and many other things cause subconscious problems. Okay, so we can get fear. And fear is really an unknown or a new experience. They're repeating a bad experience. On this person, before they jumped out of the plane, perhaps that's a new experience for them. I actually used to do this. I was a young man, and the first time I ever did this, I was a bit hungover. And I'm in there with I was only 19. There's attractive women also in the plane my age. And had to go. I felt horrible, like I was going to throw up, but I jumped out so I wouldn't seem like a wimp to them. But I had fear. Okay, and it's usually an unpleasant experience. It's an unknown experience. And then we can have anger. We can get mad at all sorts of stuff. And this is also usually something because it doesn't go our way. And then we can get upset. All right. And we can show anger because it didn't go our way. This guy didn't get the call he wanted. And then we can see something that seems unjust to us can make us angry, like this guy in the back. Can't smoke, really? With all that going on? All right. And then we don't often have a nice, serene time. We have too much stress in our life. By the way, this is St. Mary's Lake and Glacier National Park in Montana. So another stress might be with global warming, we're losing our glaciers. We might not be able to see this for much longer, but it is spectacular. Okay, so grief. There's been a lot of stages of grief that have been described, and grief is basically, we're not going to go too deep into this, but they talk about the 7 stages of grief. Don't have to go too deep. Then we get betrayal. Let's say we have a bad breakup. We tend to eat pretty poorly, and there's our bad breakup ice cream. And then we can get, this is a rather interesting book by Brene Brown, The Gifts of Imperfection. And one of the things that she was talking about in this, she's got a rather nice thing to talk about, but this can be a violation of a trust. This can be violation of a moral standard. This can be feeling violated, like your house was broken into or your car was vandalized. So one of the nice things she says is love is not something we give or get. It's something that we nurture and grow. A connection that can only be cultivated between 2 people when it exists within each one of them. We can only love others as much as we love ourselves. Okay, so what causes stress in our life? Really four things. We can have time stress, usually not enough of it because we got too much going on. We can have relationship stress. That can be anybody you know, and a relationship can be great. It can also be stressful. We can have health stress, and we can have financial stress. Bills pile up on top of us. And this is a letter from the Internal Revenue Service. By the way, they don't call. If they call, it's not them. And this person found that the amount wasn't quite right, and there's a $5,000 surcharge and a penalty on it and an interest. I know if I overpay and they send me a check back, I don't get any interest on it or an anti-penalty, but we all do. So you get a letter like that before you open it. It's stressful and it's a new relationship. Okay, so anxiety is when we worry or tense because of a misfortune or a danger, because we don't know what's coming. And this is when something is beyond our control. Let's say you're in a legal situation and lawyers and judges are involved and you just have to wait till they make a decision. It's beyond our control. Okay, forgiveness. This is often something we did or said that we wish we didn't do or say, often called a regret, or something we could undo or unsay, or if we're unfulfilled, we didn't feel like we did enough, and we can blame ourselves for that kind of thing. And self-forgiveness, and that quote by Brene Brown, we can only love others as much as we love ourselves. And if we don't forgive ourselves, we can't love ourselves. Okay, so in self-love and forgiveness ever got together, the baby would be freedom. I think that's quite true and quite lovely. Okay, now maybe we need a little bit of calmness because we've been thinking about stress. That seems nice. Okay, then we can get something called limiting beliefs. And there's a lot of them. But this is something that might have been from a parent. Oh, you're not good enough. And you can believe that. Or you didn't do enough. Or you're stupid. And then we can think all these things. We didn't work hard enough. I'm not worth it. I don't deserve whatever it is. And then we think other people are better than us, and they think if you talk, you'll sound stupid, and then that I'm not as good as other people. So this is a limiting belief, and we all perhaps have these. And the list goes on and on and on. So it's just that we don't think we're good enough. We don't think we're smart enough. We don't think we're anything enough. And this is where we get a limiting belief. Okay. So now what we call unconditional self-love. How do we define this? When you accomplish something big, you like yourself. Oh, look what I did. I've been working on that. I got it done. When you help another person, you feel good. There's a book by Ayn Rand called The Virtue of Selfishness, talking about we do things for other people because it makes us feel good. So we're doing it actually for us. Okay, then maybe you're a little upset and you snap at your kids. But your kids can also give you joy, as can pets. So that's unconditional love that we're being given. So why can't we love ourselves unconditionally? Okay, we look at all the subconscious emotions. We have fear, we have anger, we have grief, we have hurt and betrayal, we have stress, we have anxiousness. And this is different than anxiety. Anxiety can be a medical condition, but this we're anxious because of the unknown. Self-forgiveness and limiting beliefs. And then unconditional self-love. So now we see the emotions are part of Alzheimer's, but the emotions are much more than Alzheimer's. They can give us depression, they can give us fear, they can give us anxiety. So brain chemistry is another thing. And we have basically the combination between dopamine and serotonin. And then if these all work together well, we have good emotion and cognition. But if they don't, we can have impulsivity, we can have attention problems, we can have compulsion problems, we can have alertness problems. And then we can have problems with our hormones, thyroids, adrenals, absorption, and stress. So we have a lot of different things now that are driving our emotions that are connected to Alzheimer's disease. So basically, to put this all together, we can also have SNPs. And we talked earlier about a SNP being a single nucleotide polymorphism, or what we call methylation problems, and what we, maybe a bigger term we're using now is epigenetics. And we have a good SNP. It can be really good. So good stuff, serotonin's good. If it goes bad, we can get inflammation. Dopamine's good. If that goes bad, we get oxidative stress. How about GABA? They call that our body's natural Valium. That calms us down. If that goes off, we get glutamate, and that goes high. It destroys the neurons in our brain. And then how about epinephrine, which we used to call adrenaline? Helps us get places. If that's off, we make too much norepinephrine, and that causes inflammation in our brain too. So if you got a SNP in a gene that makes serotonin, you might make inflammation instead. You got a SNP in a gene that makes dopamine, you get oxidative stress. You make a SNP in GABA, you're not sleeping through the night. You're inflamed instead. Your brain is tired and wired. And instead of epinephrine, you got norepinephrine. So you're sympathetic instead of parasympathetic. So basically, we talk about the SNPs. It's a big subject. I teach a 3-day seminar in SNPs. But at Homecoming, we're going to have a 3-hour seminar, and then we're going to show how you can do this in your office at extremely low cost and just know something about it. But if you really want to know a lot about it, we'll do the whole seminar, but you'll get a lot at Homecoming. And then Friday morning, I'm going to be talking about the subconscious emotions in a bit more detail and giving my brand new hypothesis of how Parkinson's occurs. And then we're going to be giving demonstrations of how to cure subconscious emotions. And it's not the Callahan technique with acupuncture. It's not tapping on your stuff, but you don't need any equipment at all to look at your subconscious emotions. So this is going to be in January, the first Thursday night. January is, I believe that's January 3rd or 4th. I don't have a calendar in front of me. Actually, I do have a calendar in front of me. So in 2019, right after our New Year's, let's celebrate it together. So what we're going to do on January 3rd, Dr. John and Dr. Brett and I are going to be treating people. All you have to do is sign up for it. And if you want treated for emotional well-being, we'll do that night. Or if you want treated for pain or for whatever you got going on, we're going to be treating patients. And then Friday morning, I'm giving a talk, and so are some other incredible good speakers giving a talk. But mine will be on subconscious emotions and the new idea of Parkinson's disease. Then in the afternoon, we're going to have a breakout session. And I'm going to be showing how to test for SNPs and single nucleotide polymorphisms. And you can do this in your office starting Monday morning if you want. But if you really want to know this stuff, come to one of my 3-day seminars, and people talk really good about it, and we can really get to know each other. I can really show you how to do this. And then come Saturday morning, be talking much more about Alzheimer's and telling you not only how to prevent it, but how to treat it as well. So that's all coming up at Homecoming. And this is one of my favorite places to talk because we've got so many good people, and we see a lot of the same people coming every year because it's always fresh every year. So if you got any questions, we've got just a couple more minutes, and I'd be happy to answer them. If you want to ask them now, just type them in. And if not, I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I hope you got something you can really take home for it. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. If not, I really appreciate your being here. And it gives me joy that you want to learn more to help your patients, and you really want to learn a lot more. Homecoming is one of them, just a lot of fun, and so many good people and so much good information. And I'll be there, and I'll look forward to seeing you there as well. So if you have any questions, ask them now. If not, I just can't wait to see you at Homecoming.
Dr. Mark, let me interject a couple things here before we sign off. It's actually the 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Oh, I got my dates wrong.
It's no problem. It's 4th, 5th, and 6th, but it's Thursday night is the workshop. There'll be you, Dr. Brett, myself, Dr. Smaldone, Dr. Porter will be on hand. Dr. Harper will be out on hand answering questions from there. We have Dr. Bly Hatch that's going to be treating. We have about 5 other people. These are 10 of us that are treating there, and some of them may actually be listening here tonight. So if I didn't mention your name right now, please don't feel slighted. They help us almost every year. Now, if you're new to this work, or when you listen to this tape, we'll send this out to 20,000 people in the next couple of days. So you're saying, how in the world did Dr. Harris, with his photographic mind, tie all these subjects together? Because they are inseparable. What we have found is there are 6 interferences. You can't have Alzheimer's alone, usually from just chemical problems. You can have chemical problems and stress. You can have chemical problems and stress and nutritional problems, diabetes, insulin sensitivity. You can have structural, nutritional, emotional. You can have mercury poisoning. So there's 6 different major categories. What he's just shown you here is how you treat all at the same time to get the kind of miracles that we shoot for. In fact, we call the Brimhall Protocol mentoring in miracles. We say if you're doing the Brimhall Protocol and you don't have to stop after every night at work to discuss the miracles you saw that day, you're not doing it correctly, because that's what happens. Of course, Dr. Merck is such an advantage to us, helping you see how structured, nutritional, emotional, electromagnetic poisoning, allergies and sensitivities, toxic accumulation are all tying in to causing the dis-ease. And with the 6 steps to wellness, we correct structure. If it's a spinal problem, maybe it's a foot problem, an elbow, a knee. Maybe it's a craniosacral problem. Maybe the viscera is dropped. Maybe the kidneys are dropped, or the uterus is twisted. Maybe there's a nutritional deficiency and in your estrogen overload and don't have enough progesterone. And there's just so many avenues that you can look at the cause of the problem. Unless you have a system evaluating that, you're lost all the time. This is what Dr. Harris is going to show you in his 3 separate classes. How do we check for structure, nutritional, emotional? Not only will he be teaching that, but so will I, so will Dr. Brett. As I mentioned, Dr. Smaldone was showing the structural aspect of it and the taping. Dr. Porter and Dr. Cook will be showing you the emotional side of the triangle. Dr. Turchin will show you how to use light to tap into all of those at the same time. And that's what this is all about. Taking you from where you are to where maybe you want to go. It's okay to have roller skates, but what if you could have a rocket ship at your disposal? And that's exactly what the 6 steps are. 6 amazing ways of evaluating somebody, 6 steps. And you say, well, how do biological allograft or increasing stem cells in the body fit into the 6 steps? A lot of ways, especially it's on maybe say the nutritional side of the triangle, because you're able to give the body at 70 the same kind of go power it had at 17. And without that type of input, you can't really do that, because we are designed to live and to get older and to die. And if you don't want to die prematurely, or you don't want to die with a disease, a named and blamed condition, what if we could do all the 6 steps? Dr. Harper feels like we can extend our life easily by doing all 6 steps properly and using the biological allograft to 139. So that's not too bad. The long life expectancy, I think, for men and women both end in the 70s somewhere normally.
79
yes.
for women, 77 for men.
Say it again.
79 for women, 77 for men.
Okay, there we go. So we have exact numbers. There's our statistician at hand. Well, I've said enough there. If you don't have questions, I think we will sign off. But you can see Dr. Mark has just opened each door for you to peek inside. For the rest of the story.
Can I say one more thing, John?
Yeah, please. But for the rest of the story, you got to come.
I talked about financial stress as being one. There's also people at Homecoming going to be talking about that too, and how to really do a really good job with your financial well-being.
Right, things that you and I've taken advantage of, and that's why we share it with other people, because it's been so phenomenal for us.
Absolutely.
Do you see any questions there, Dr. Mark?
I don't. I hope I did a good enough job that we didn't have to have any questions.
Well, we'll let them write them down between now and Homecoming. So we'll see you guys there. Thanks, Dr. Mark. We look forward to seeing you guys January 3rd in the evening, 4th, 5th, and 6th for the full delivery. And then the other biological allograft seminars Dr. Mark and I are going to be doing next year, his methylation seminars. He's doing every month, I believe, this next year. Come and see the new nutrition. Dr. Mark created 10 new ones this year, Dr. Mark?
Yep, we're up to 11 now. We got more coming.
Fantastic. All right, guys. Good night. God bless you all. See you very soon.
Good night. Looking forward to seeing you.
Bye-bye.